Good news, the second reading of SB3 has been postponed until February 7th, which is next Friday. The reason why that's good news is because this gives you time to craft your email that you're going to send to your senators and to your representatives. Stay tuned. So like I said in the intro, the SB3 reading has been postponed till 7 February of next week, Friday. Now, here's the thing. They were trying to push us through, probably, because it's so controversial. If you look at, Dragon Man's, I can't remember her name, but anyway, it's one of the daughters from Dragon Man's. She was saying that that they would likely push it from her contacts, and then they actually did push it, right? But this is a controversial bill, and she was saying also that during the testimony, those who are in support of this bill ran out of people. Those who are opposed to this bill, basically, the testimony was 9 hours long. 9 hours long. And those who supported the bill actually ran out of people. Those who opposed the bill stayed until the very, very end. And there were still people that were waiting on the Zoom call. So that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. But here's the thing. If we, as Coloradans, do not let our senators and our representatives know that we do not want this bill, we do not want it to become law, it is not going to stop violent crime with firearms. It's not going to stop criminals from obtaining firearms that they're not supposed to obtain. They claim that it's, to enforce the 15-round capacity here in Colorado, but that's not true. It couldn't be further from the truth, because if they just wanted to make the law enforcement enforce the laws that are on the books, then they would, create a law to enforce the law enforcement to do so, right? So maybe they would threaten, taking their funding away or something of that nature, but they're not doing that. They're trying to definitely create a different definition of the firearm, right? That they're trying to ban. And that different definition basically means it has a fixed magazine, okay? So, and most importantly, they're giving the power, the unilateral power, to the state attorney general to decide what is legal and what isn't. And that is dangerous. When you give somebody unilateral power of anything, that is dangerous. That is rife for corruption and misinterpretation of the law. Okay? This is why we have a Supreme Court with 9 justices. This is why when you have a judge who may have misinterpreted the law. This is why we can actually appeal it, and it goes up to the appellate court. This is why when we challenge laws, there might be an en banc panel, or there might be a panel of 3 individuals, 3 judges, to decide something, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. This is why we don't give anyone unilateral power of anything, to include the President of the United States. Right now, Trump signed an executive order to halt the birthright citizenship clause, which a lot of people claim the 14th Amendment has a unqualified command on that. But even though he's the President of the United States, a federal judge blocked his mandate. This is exactly why we don't have one person having unilateral control over anything. And I'm starting more and more to realize why that is as I get older. Okay, so here's the deal. So if you've stayed this long in this video, first of all, thank you. I appreciate it. Secondly, hit that like button, subscribe, and then I'm trying to follow this stuff for you guys, and I'm trying to educate myself as well on this stuff, right? So first and foremost, I 100% believe this goes against the Second Amendment. 100% believe this goes against our militia laws. 100% believe that the tyrants that are in power, they might not even know they're tyrants, if that makes sense. They're doing this. For example, Tom Sullivan, he is doing this on an emotional basis. His son died during the Aurora movie theater shooting. So I get it. He wants to try to do something so that other people aren't harmed or injured from some crazed lunatic with a firearm that happens to have a detachable box magazine, and he was able to kill and injure a lot of people at one time. But he's not looking at facts, statistics, law, and our constitutional rights. When it comes to facts, yes, that one individual was able to kill and hurt a lot of people, to include his son. The frequency that mass shootings happen are far, far less than just regular violence on a day-to-day basis. So he's going after something really, really small. He's hyper-focused on something really, really small that probably will not have an impact positively on this state or its people. He's hyper-focused on that, when he could be focused on the big picture of things. You need to write your senator, you need to write your representative here in Colorado, okay? You need to do that. And you need to craft that letter, and it needs to be, it needs to have some value to it, right? It needs to have some teeth to it. But in the subject line, what you need to do is put opposition to SB25-003, okay? Or opposition to SB3, something like that. Because even if they don't read the letter, the email, they may see the subject line. And if the subject line has, if let's say we have 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 people that say, hey, here's my opposition to SB3. If that's in the subject line, and they see a bunch of those, well, for me personally, if I was looking at that, I would go, okay, well, how many people are in opposition and how many people are in support? And how many people are Coloradans, for example? If I was on the fence. Of course, I'm not on the fence, so it wouldn't matter to me, even if I had power to vote for or against this thing. If I had power to vote for or against this thing, it would be 100% against, regardless of how many people were for it, because there's a Constitution, and my oath would have been to the Constitution. Okay? So that comes first and foremost. Which brings me to reasons why, things that you should put in your email, or some ideas to put in your email to oppose this legislation. Okay. One, the proposed bill was introduced by Tom Sullivan, which is the prime sponsor. One of the sponsors on that is Wiseman. Both Tom Sullivan and Wiseman are on the same committee that passed it the first reading. I mean, that doesn't seem very fair to me. I believe that if there's a prime sponsor of a bill, that bill cannot or should not go to the same committee that sponsors on to be read to. Like, it's just, it seems like a conflict of interest to me. Maybe it should go to another committee, so they can vote on it. All right, because obviously the prime sponsor is going to vote for his damn bill, right? And the sponsor, which consequently is the chair and the vice chair, right? Wiseman's the chair, Tom Sullivan is the vice chair, and they're both sponsors on the bill. So of course they're going to vote for it. So that's one thing you could put in there. Another thing you could put in there is that here recently, a 3-judge panel just smacked down a federal law that says 18, 19, 20-year-olds cannot purchase a firearm, a pistol, which is the most common type of firearm in the United States, cannot purchase a pistol from an FFL. They just smacked it down in a 3-0 decision. These are federal judges on federal benches that smack down a federal law that says 18, 19, and 20-year-olds cannot purchase handguns. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, this bill is the SB3 is a prohibition on purchasing, manufacturing, or importing, or doing anything like that with a firearm that's a gas-operated, semi-automatic, detachable box magazine firearm, basically. That's what it does. It prohibits the sale and purchase and transfer of these firearms. Well, this federal law that prohibited the purchase and the sale thereof to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. Not because they're 18, 19, and 20. Well, that's probably part of the reason. But the other reason is that they need to be able to purchase those things because they are part of the people. They are part of the militia. Okay? So that's another thing you can put in there, that a 3-judge panel, a 3-judge federal panel just smacked down a federal law about purchasing firearms. Okay? About the prohibition of purchasing firearms for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. Another idea that you might want to put in your letter is the financial impact that it's going to have on Colorado and Colorado citizens. So if this bill becomes law, there's no doubt the black market will become bigger. Zero doubt that the black market will become bigger. What happens when the government prohibits something? Go ahead, I'll wait. No, I'm just kidding. I'll tell you, there's always a black market associated with that. When there was a prohibition on alcohol, what happened? When there's a prohibition on marijuana, what happened? When there's prohibition on abortions, you get what I'm saying? Like, there's all these prohibitions that when you prohibit something, okay, whatever it is, there's always going to be a market on the back end of it. There's always going to be a market on the back end of it. And in that market, that's where criminals thrive. They thrive in that market, right? So marijuana, for example, when, the United States prohibited, and it's still a federal law, you cannot smoke marijuana federally in the federal law. But here in Colorado, you can, right? And a lot of other states actually allow it in their states, okay? But when it was prohibited in all 50 states, and to include the federal government, where was the black market? The drug cartels. The drug cartels was getting marijuana here in the United States because people wanted to smoke marijuana, and they wanted to get their high, right? Taxes. Okay. So here in April, the excise tax of 6.5% goes into effect here in Colorado for firearms related items. That's just not firearms. Okay. So since let's call it the AR-15 platform is the most popular rifle in America and possibly the world, right? It's probably in competition with the AK-47, but the most popular rifle, if you put a prohibition on that and it can't be sold, okay, or purchased, then you can't get the 6.5% excise tax that comes with it, right? And I don't think the 6.5% excise tax should be a thing anyway, but just to make a point, the state can't get taxes from that firearm that's been sold. Does it make sense? So there's that. Gun stores are probably going to shut down. Small gun stores, small FFL is probably going to shut down, which means your businesses are likely to decline. Your large gun stores like Cabela's and all that stuff, they're going to get more profitable. So for you guys who think that the corporate greed is a thing, which I believe it's a thing too, but if you don't want to support corporate entities like Cabela's and Bass Pro and so on and so forth, this bill should not be passed, right? So that's a big thing, right? When I go to an FFL, I go to a local FFL that is not a Cabela's. It is not a Bass Pro. It is not some kind of big market corporate entity, okay? So there's another reason. And then you could potentially have an exodus of firearms owners in Colorado. And that's important in a bunch of ways. Well, one, those people who leave Colorado wouldn't be able to retrieve taxes from them, okay, to support any of the programs that Colorado has. Another reason is that if we, as, let's say, I don't want to say conservative or liberal, if we as people who believe in the Second Amendment, who believe we should be able to go and purchase a firearm to defend ourselves and to defend our community, if we believe that wholeheartedly, we want more firearms owners in Colorado. I haven't looked at the statistics specifically, but somewhere around 45 to 50% of Coloradans have firearms. Now, just because you have a firearm doesn't mean you're a Second Amendment advocate, which is a misnomer. A lot of people, when they go to argue, they're like, oh, I'd like to start off by saying I own firearms, and then they'll say, but, blah, 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 right? If you have to say but in that, then you are not a Second Amendment advocate. 100% you're not. If you say something like, I have firearms, and I'm a hunter, but blah, blah, blah. Okay, the Second Amendment has zero to do with hunting. Zero. So I'm tired of hearing that from people who say that they're Second Amendment advocates or whatever, even if they agree with me on most of the other stuff. Like, stop saying I'm a hunter, I'm an avid hunter, and I support the Second Amendment because I'm an avid hunter. No, you're not. That's not It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. It has zero to do with it. But anyway, so mass exodus. We definitely want firearms owners in this state, and not only firearms owners, but also firearms owners who are Second Amendment advocates. That's the point of the thing there. Okay. Now, some historical teeth to this. Okay, so we all know that the American Revolution was from 1775 to 1783. Okay. During the American Revolution, there was generals like the Swamp Fox or Francis Marion, who is infamous for running guerrilla warfare against the British. Okay, and this wasn't a standing army. Okay, this was a militia force, a volunteer militia force, to fight against the British. They had to bring their own firearms and all that other stuff, and I'll get into that in a minute. But this is exactly, the militia is exactly why we are America today. And they had to bring their own stuff, okay? So where did the militia come from, okay? This is so let's say after the Revolutionary War, okay? So from 1783 to 1791, which is when the Second Amendment was ratified, okay? I'm going to read this for you, and this is from the American Military History, Volume 1, Chapter 5, okay? And it says, and I quote, "The militia issue was also central to shaping of the Second Amendment to the Constitution, the right to keep and bear arms. The Founding Fathers recognized the centrality of freedom of speech, the press, and assembly. They also made clear those freedoms would only remain secure if the people could keep and bear arms as an ultimate check on the power of government." Pretty powerful stuff there, okay? So that was 1783 to 1791, okay? Obviously, that's not the whole thing, but that right there is very powerful to say the last sentence here, okay? It was a check on power of the government at that time. Okay. So then why does that matter exactly? Well, if the Founding Fathers thought it was the check of power on government during that time, that still resonates today. And not only governments, but tyrannical bodies. That's terrorist organizations. That's the cartel. That's anybody who would come and be a tyrannical figure on you or your country. Okay, so that's the way I interpret it. Obviously, we know the Second Amendment was ratified in 1791, and we know what that says. I'm not going to go through that. Okay, but then in 1792, there was a thing called the Militia Act. The Militia Act of 1792. And then there was one in 1795. We're not going to get there. But I'm going to read this. And this is what the militia is and what they had to bring. This is important. So when we look at this, I want you to notice exactly of what they needed to bring to muster. Okay? That every citizen so enrolled and notified shall, within 6 months thereafter, provide himself with a good musket or flintlock, a sufficient bayonet and belt, 2 spare flints, and a knapsack, a pouch, with a box therein, to contain not less than 24 cartridges, suited to the bore of his musket or flintlock, Each cartridge to contain the proper quantity of powder and ball, or with good rifle, knapsack, shot pouch, and powder horn, 20 balls suited to the bore of his rifle, and a quarter of a pound of powder, and shall appear so armed, accoutred or furnished, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and provided when called out to exercise or into service, except that when called out on a company's days to exercise only, he may appear without a knapsack. The Militia Act of 1972. Why is that important? Did you hear the specific things that were required for militia service? Now, at the time, we're talking about, flintlocks and muskets. The militia had flintlocks and muskets to repel a standing army of the British. I mean, they just got done fighting a war with the British. They have to repel not only the British, but the Indians, and as they call it, the Floridas, right? So I think the Spaniards at that time. They had to repel these people, so they had to have the same kind of equipment that those other people had. Which brings us to today. We need the same kind of equipment to repel any force that comes against us. Okay? So who is the state militia? Colorado Revised Statutes 28-4-104. You can read it for yourself. The governor is authorized to organize and maintain within this state such military forces as the governor deems necessary to defend the state. Such forces are known as the State Defense Force and are composed of such citizens of the state who volunteer or who are ordered by the governor to qualify for service therein. Such forces are additional to and distinct from the National Guard. The Colorado State Defense Force is maintained in numbers to be determined by the governor. If organized by the governor, the Colorado State Defense Force is a Type 2 entity, as defined in Section 24-1-105. No officer or enlisted person of this force can be a member of the National Guard or other armed force of the United States. Such part of this force, as ordered by the governor, is uniformed. Any part or all of this force may be called to the State Defense Force, active duty, at the pleasure of the governor. All costs and expenses of the State Defense Force are paid from the general fund by separate appropriation to the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. Colorado Revised Statute 28-4-104. So, my point being is, those able-bodied men from 18 to 65 years of age here in Colorado are the State Defense Force. They can't be part of the National Guard. They can't be part of the armed forces. And there's some other exclusionary provisions as well, like law enforcement officers, clerks, so on and so forth. The federal law specifically says that the militia is 18 to 45 years old. And they were supposed to furnish their own equipment. Those are my arguments. If you look at the historical nature of what the militia is and who they're supposed to be today, you can only come to the conclusion that we need the same type of firearm, which we don't, by the way. We don't have that. An AR-15 is not an M4. It's not an automatic. We would need the same type of equipment that any adversary may have. And we need to furnish it ourselves. And the only way to do that is if we are able to purchase it.